panel is called Decoding the Circular Economy as a Competitive Advantage in Business. And who doesn't love that, right? Competitive advantage in business. So let's please welcome everyone with a warm applause. Let's go and introduce yourself. Who are you? What's your work in sustainability? What do you want to share with all of us?
Hi, I'm Hannah, and I've been working with Houdini for the last 20 years, actually. And we have been on a quest in sustainability for all those years. So Houdini, it's a company, a Swedish company working within outdoor and lifestyle, I would say. A little bit more lifestyle outside Sweden than in Sweden. I know it's a lot of Swedes here. It's a 25 million euro company, relatively small compared to what we heard yesterday. But I think within our industry we have a clear, we have put out the mark and quite a high level of what we are doing. Yeah.
Hey, hello everybody. My name is Chisco Garcia. I was working for textile for the last 30 years, and I was working for big players as Inditex, and I'm involved in sustainability in the last 10 years. At the time, nobody understood about anything about, and I found that I have the responsibility to solve the problems that I create the past 20 years, So I prefer to be involved from the business core, and I was very, very happy to try to improve all the things that we have to do in this sector. So, yeah.
Thank you. So good morning, my name is Peter Etala, so I'm the founder of EasyCom. Similar to Cisco, I spent 30 years, but in another area within logistics, e-commerce, systems around that. So a lot of focus on executing things to make things more profitable, more sustainable, and automated in order to have good businesses running with low effort.
Good morning, my name is Fabian Månsson, and I left earlier than the rest of you guys, and still I sound like this. But I've been in the industry for 30 plus years. We figured that out. And my background is I worked for 10 years for H&M. I ran a company called Eddie Bauer in the US for 5 years, and then I spent the last 15 years working with a lot of different companies. And when I was at H&M in '97, we put together the first code of conduct that they'd ever had, and it was a fantastic, interesting time, because I think what Chisco is saying, we're trying to amend a lot of stuff that we've caused wrong in the past. But I think one of the aspects that we'll talk about today is education and understanding around this area, because when we put it together, I had to fight, since this was being recorded, I won't say who, but I had to fight somebody in the organization who said, this is not good for the shareholders. And he actually came back later and said, I understand now why we're doing it. So, but still then, it was a lot about child labor, it was about chemicals, it was nothing around circularity, it was, that whole aspect hadn't come in. So the world has changed a lot, and I think there's both huge risks and big opportunities as well going forward.
I fully agree, and we are all here for the opportunities. We really want to signal that there's so much to do, but also there's so much entrepreneurial spirit to be engaged in this topic. Since it usually is a dark topic, people want to avoid sustainability. So asking you all here, who shops sustainable? How? Please raise your hand if you feel you identified as a sustainable shopper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anna, you had your hand up and you took it down. 5 people. 5 people saw fully. That's honest. Thank you for sharing that. So our purpose here is really to enlighten you and give you a perspective of there's much more to do, and also see the opportunities as entrepreneurs to contribute to that change. So Hannah, let's start with you. Houdini is, as you were introducing yourself here to someone in the public and you said you were working with Houdini and that person immediately just bowed to you. So you feel very religious in that segment. And everyone that I have been meeting with introducing Houdini and saying the word Houdini, they're just like, oh my God, Houdini. What have you done to create that brand?
Yes, I mean what we started with was to really go into ourselves and sort of, you know, change Houdini or create Houdini. It was small at the time, of course, but so we started with the materials and the production. So 87% of what we are doing now in production is circular. What does it mean? We have natural material, of course, and that is, of course, circular by nature, and then the polyester is recycled or recyclable. So in that way, you then have a circular loop, sort of. So the next step now, which we've been elaborating with for some time now, is to connect it to follow the product through the product circle to the very end when you actually recycle it, because it's done. So there it comes in with, of course, reuse, which is vintage, nothing new with that, but it's a great way of circle the products. Rental, we talked about that. Subscription, of course, and make sure that you could, as a customer, choose what you want to do. So you go then from owning something to just lending it from the product cycle, sort of. So what we are thinking to do now is, we are a premium brand. We think you need to be a premium brand to be able to do this, actually. And so our step-in price in apparel will be then the circle part of it. So, and that way you also will get inclusive, and it's not going to be that expensive. So that's how we see it, the short version of it.
What does it mean to be a premium brand?
I mean, a premium brand, well, you could probably categorize that in, I mean, what the brand sends out, what values is it, but it's of course also a price issue, I think you will put in there as well. So that's, but all the values that is in the brand, I would say.
Thank you. Chisco? What would you say has been the most challenging part of working at Inditex? And tell us a little bit of 3S Institute as well, please.
I mean, in the last 10 years, the more, difficult thing is doing as big company as Inditex sustainable, you know, because, are not native. You can find another brands that are from the very beginning, and now you have to change all the politics, all the things inside a big company to improve all these things. I have to say that, it's good because, for good and for bad, because, you can do much more things than small players, right? And I think Inditex and H&M, they're doing very good. They are improving a lot of things, and they're, doing really good searching in terms of raw materials, sustainables, and helping people, even suppliers, to improve in that way. The point is that a lot of people was approaching to me in order to learn, because not so many people has the resources to go, to buy, to find the right suppliers, the right materials, and then I found the opportunity to teach and to learn by myself about another, suppliers, another brands, sometimes small brands, sometimes very big companies, but not in Europe, South Africa or America, for instance, that are very interested in being sustainable, but they don't know how to do it. So 3S Institute has 3 legs that for me are very important. The first leg is education. The second is advising, so a companion to the companies, and the third is research. So education for me is very, very important. So we are doing, I mean, as lecturers in many universities, that they don't have, I mean, sustainability as something that they have to learn. So,
And who is it that we need to educate, since education is such a big part that, you know, you created this think tank?
they have to be, I mean, inside the universities, and they're not right at the moment. But I mean, we are trying to do that, and I mean, we spend a lot of time of our job doing that. For instance, going around the world in different countries to do that. And because when one designer, for instance, I was talking before, I mean, maybe the CEO of the company can do a very sustainable strategy for the company, all right? But the real decision maker is a woman who is like 23 years and is a designer. She's going to decide which are the materials, which are the suppliers who has to do that product. If not, I mean, it's not true. That strategy is not going ahead.
So you put the responsibility on that female designer in her young stage of her career, even though she has these shareholders and people above her that tell her what to do. You feel that she still is the man in charge?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And also, I mean, as I told you, the research is very important because they need also resources to do their jobs, you know. And nowadays, I mean, it's a lot of things that are missing in terms of recycling, for instance. Is many materials that are not, I mean, able to recycle. Like, I mean, the lycra, elastane, or the different mixes inside the garments. So this is another thing that we are trying to improve and doing from 3S Institute. And the other thing is like advisors, like being accompanied companies in order to do that compliance, that research, the sourcing for looking for different raw materials or different manufacturers in order to get these sustainable products that we needed.
Thank you. Fabian?
Can I just have one?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I'm just thinking what we are doing and what everyone is talking about now is to design from the start. That is very important, and so this responsibility needs to be, of course, everywhere. The design needs to be the start of how in the sustainability journey, so to speak.
And we have to educate these people from the very beginning, when they became inside the companies, small or big, but they have to be educated.
Fabian, from your years, now we'll talk with Inditex, from your years at H&M, what have you learned from the sustainability agenda that you were involved with in the company?
Well, I think, you know, if I'm the 23-year-old designer, then it comes to the 23-and-a-half-year-old buyer who is sitting and negotiating. And so I have this spec that the 23-year-old designer put together. This is obviously a joke that is 23, but my point is it could be spec'd in the 100% right way. But I have a demand on me as a buyer that I need to meet my budget. I need to meet my margins. The only way to do that is it won't be 100% cotton, but I may have to have 38% polyester in it. And that's when you get into another tricky issue about mixing of materials. Because then, you know, to recycle that material is so much, it's almost impossible so far. We're getting a lot of better technology to do this today, but if it's mixed to that degree, say 60-40, it can't be recycled in the material way.
And what would you know, from a perspective of you also investing in a lot of businesses, what would you tell the CEOs and the founders of these companies? What should be their business strategy from the start?
Well, I think you have two different parts, right? We spoke about this earlier. You have the current incumbents in the industry. And industry, by the way, if you look at McKinsey's report around the state of fashion, that doesn't have a great profitability, is way over, has way too many players. And so I think there are going to be certain players that are putting a lot of effort and money into this area, figuring out how do we do this sustainable or in an as least non-sustainable way as possible, if I'm being a little bit harsh. But then you also have new players. And that's where I think there's opportunity here, because you can start a new player and you have to be thinking about the whole cycle of a garment. And I think one of the big things that I talk about is tracking. So you need to put in processes that track the input material, how you transport it, how does that factory work, where did that cotton come from? All of those aspects, so you can track it, and then you can later see where did that wind up. So collection of data is something that I think the industry is talking a lot more about, but hasn't done as well thus far. So that I think is one huge opportunity.
And that's a business opportunity.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Anyone ready to jump on that one? Ish, maybe. Peter, what led to the inception of creating EasyCom? What was the opportunity that you saw, and what's your experience in e-commerce?
Well, I think the thing that led to EasyCom was the meeting scientists at the University of Lund in 2008, who started to look into the returns and why are people returning. And nobody had any tools to handle returns. It was just the cost and the things coming back as a surprise for the companies. So what he found was that it's difficult if you say that a consumer is a bad consumer from a sustainability point of view and profitability point of view if they are returning frequently. So if you're a frequent returner, you still can be very profitable for the company. But then it comes down to the sustainability part. But the first part to address is if you can make the consumer aware, educate on being more the impact of returning frequently, then you also have a good impact on sustainability. So these new insights is telling that the things we think about returns, why it's good or bad, was wrong. So the new insights gave tools to calculate profitability down on consumer and product level. And by using that, you know what things you should promote and demote. And in the long run, what we have in front of us is can you make things, as we talked about in the panel just before, can you make things move more cycles and circles? That will help sustainability. It needs to be good quality, as we talked about as well. And we also have the elephant in the room that we shouldn't be negative, but we have the EU legislation coming up now. So it's in place. So companies need to start reporting on sustainability. And back to what Fabian said as well, you need to start tracking products. And in that process and legislation, you have the product pass as well coming for products. And that will open up two things. That will open up a good possibility to really measure on the same, with the same metrics through all companies, but also take that as a business opportunity to see how can you measure, how can you then circulate your products in multiple circles.
And is shipping really the bad thief in this game?
We will probably debate this later on, but I say that production and taking things, as Cisco said, from raw material, virgin material, and dyeing and producing, that has a much bigger impact than transportation. So I read 3 different reports saying that more than 98% of energy waste is on the product compared to transportation. That is less than 2%, which means that using the thing smart, producing fewer items, but transporting them a bit longer, making them in usage more often, that will be a good effect.
We have also electric cars by now, so it feels like that's also contributing to less waste.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is the same tech implementing in the shipping? Are you using, what's your software?
Yeah, sorry, just repeat the question, please.
Of course. No, I'm just saying that when it comes to shipping, we have now electric-driven cars,
Yes.
so it's less fuel being used. What is the software that you developed in the terms of energy?
So what we do is that we still optimize. So taking decision early for a product, should it go to full price sale, outlet, charity, or upcycling? We try to direct it as short distance as possible and as fast as possible, which means that you don't transport broken stuff from customers in Germany to a warehouse in Sweden and then throw it away. That is really bad. So we try to stop it really early.
Okay. Fabian?
No, I was laughing because you said we have now electrical cars, so now it's going to be obviously so much better, right?
Yeah.
So going back to one thing that Hannah brought up here earlier, we'll do a pop quiz here. You know, is a paper bag as a consumer better or worse than the plastic bag? Which one do you choose, if you can, at a store? Paper, sorry? Exactly, so this is where it gets tricky, right? So the plastic bag actually, with the research that we have now, is less bad for the environment as long as it doesn't wind up in the environment, because then it's much worse than the paper bag. So my point is more that it's a quite complex topic. And I read a study of, is the Toyota Prius worse or less bad for the environment than the Toyota Land Cruiser, the big four-wheel drive one? And they actually came to the conclusion that the Prius is worse, because they came to the conclusion that about the Land Cruiser, which is an unfair comparison, because once it's gone 50 or 500,000 kilometers, it'll get shipped to the third world and it'll continue to be in use, because it's the life cycle aspect of this. Whereas if you find a Prius that's gone 300,000 kilometers, you'd be like, is that battery going to work, and how much plastic do you need to change to make that work? So you need to look at the whole life cycle. So my point is more, it's a tricky area, and that's why education, constantly talking about this. Buy less, buy better. Use it more often, or not, use it better and take care of your things.
How many of you know how to take care of your garments? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What do you do when you take care of them? Do you have a runner that can pass on the microphone? Who raised your hand on how you take care of your garments? Someone here.
Hello.
Yes?
So I've been working in fashion for quite some time now. So everyone has actually labels telling you what you need to do. What I realize is most people doesn't actually read it. So in most of these cases, you can actually do a lot with your garments just by not using, for instance, the easy way to do things is using the tumble dryer. That's one of the worst things that you can do for like taking care of your garments. It's also, we have a tendency in overwashing sometimes clothes as well. So there is sometimes, it's not like you should not wash your clothes, but you should start taking more care of when you use the clothes and for what do you use the clothes. So that's kind of like the more approach of how to be sustainable in that sense. And then we have a tendency as well to overuse chemicals on the washing powder that we use. So using less chemicals or more natural washing powder, that's also going to take care of your items in a better way. And it also comes down to all the ironing and so on that we do with the clothes.
Love it. 1 out of 80 people does this. Anyone feels inspired to continue? Hannah, you were talking about in our conversation how we need to treat, on the topic of this as well, taking care of your garments, we need to treat our clothes as assets. And you have developed a business opportunity.
Yes, I think how we see it now and going forward is that our customers will have their wardrobe. And yes, it's an asset in a way, because that wardrobe should then circulate, meaning that you buy something, hopefully you buy something secondhand, or maybe you rent something, or if you only are going to ski for a week or so forth. So and then you sell it again from your wardrobe. So that's what we think, just like you have Airbnb or anything like that, right? So then you have had an interesting conversation yesterday. I mean, then you have also a value of a second value of your garment, which is the second-hand value, and that could, of course, be written when you buy it, even. So it's very interesting. But I think, I mean, overconsumption that we said is, I mean, it's the largest problem, really. Use your clothes and then circulate it back until it's done. That is the most important thing, and take care of it meanwhile. And then we are also want to inspire to a lifestyle that is contributing to this. So then everything is circular. And the next step is then to become regenerative, meaning that we actually give back to Mother Earth. And that you could do by composting, for example, your wool clothes or all the naturals. Or you could use a way of what you say, when you put the color, when you put color on the garments or on the the labs, then there are methods now that actually give back to it's nutrient to the soil, right? So there is so many things coming back, so you don't even need to use the resources. You can actually give back, so you are net positive in the end. We are not there yet, but that's where we're going.
And what kind of materials are you working with mainly?
I mean, we have a mix of natural materials and polyester materials, synthetics, yes.
And those are sustainable?
They are sustainable in, yes, I mean, the naturals you could, of course, you could compost them. So yes, they are part of the natural circularity. And the synthetics is, we are only using reused or recycle and recyclable materials. So it's a loop in itself, yes.
So do you envision a world where all of us, instead of shipping all these clothes to Africa, we start composting them in our backyards ourselves?
I would say yes.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Love that. Chisco, we have a lot of growth interested people in here. And sometimes when you talk about sustainability, growth seems to be its opposite. Do you agree, or what's your thought on that?
I mean, it has to be the same thing. I mean, sustainability has to be profitable, and it has to be efficient. If not, it's greenwashing. I mean, you cannot put value in increasing price or doing your business not profitable because it's sustainable, you know. So linking with the consumption, also we are not having the idea that growing is the only thing that we can do inside a business. I mean, maybe we can improve our margins, even improving the quality, having best results, even, you know, increasing your incomes, but not increasing the quantity of products that you are doing in your business. So that's the point. But for sure, sustainability has to be profitable and efficient. That's.
And what is Inditex doing on that area?
I mean, in fact, they are doing less collections. I mean, they're increasing the prices because they're improving the quality. And the point is that people has to, I mean, rethink a little bit about how they're going to spend their money in these garments, you know.
It feels like we're in this financial state of market that we are in right now as well. The middle class consumer is a little bit of vanishing. It will be this in between that previously you couldn't really rely on as a business owner either, because you never know if they are able to buy or not buy. And it feels like now we're going towards this premium customer that everyone wants, with also you increasing prices from the part of Inditex. And that also is changing this movement of the market, because suddenly you might not be shopping as equally much when the prices are higher. You might then just go and buy a garment or two instead of 45 when everything is too affordable.
Yeah, but the point is, as Peter said before, legislation is coming, and this is very good for everybody. We'll have a same standard for all kind of garments and all type of targets. So in the future, you could choose. I mean, if you want to spend more or less money in your garments, but it could be the same range of sustainability for everything, you know. So I mean, we are everybody. I mean, saying the same about we are very happy to to have this legislation, I mean, for the industry.
Fabian, I know you have to move soon, but I do have a question on consumer buying, because as we can see here, you are in many different fashion brands, and your experience within the 30 years, you know that it's, as you've been saying, like it's a lot about education. But what do you see we can do right here, right now, to go towards educating? How do we start?
Well, I think everybody has a responsibility within the industry, and also I'm not in that many fashion companies these days. I try to work more and more with companies that have more of a more with style versus fashion, longevity versus just fast fashion. So I think that the whole aspect of educating, that is one part. But we were talking about the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 impact. So you're always coming back to that scope 3. That's where the big part is. So to try to see the brighter part of this as well, there are also new innovations coming out. Finland, for instance, has 2 companies. One is called Spinnova and one is called Infinited Fiber. And they're very early on in their processes, but trying to do materials that can be recycled 100% and that are man-made fibers. But it also comes back to, I think there are opportunities when we talked about before here, how do you recycle it? How do you ensure that it is recycled, that it doesn't wind up in a lake or in Accra in Ghana, etc. So I think educating everybody as much as possible, but also facing the, we're coming from a quite privileged view here. We're all from the EU. We happen to be born here, and the legislation we're talking about is the EU. Temu, are they going to care about this? Shein, are they going to care about this? Is the consumer going to care about this when it's like, holy smoke, I can buy, what was it I heard yesterday, these little hair threads. It's like 1,000 for, €2. How is that even possible? It isn't possible. They have a longer, they have a different reason for some of these things. But I think just, continually, it's going to take a long, long time to just continue educating, and legislation is going to help. Absolutely. We need to change. It cannot go on in the same way. We're producing 100 billion garments a year. Each individual on the planet is consuming 11 kilos of textiles a year, on average. Do you need that?
Do we feel shamed? Yeah.
I'm not trying to shame. I'm just trying to. I think the educational aspect is really, really important here. But I also, again, back to there are entrepreneurial opportunities in here. How can you, find the niches? How do you help these companies that are not getting in the way? There are, a lot of initiatives where you really start. I wouldn't say shame, but at least there are companies that aren't signing up to any of these charters.
And what will happen to them when the EU law comes? Will they just vanish?
I think it's going to take a long time. Depends on what their positioning is. Have they built up a loyal following, or are they just about price? Because if you don't have a lot of money, or you're 22 and you're just like, oh wow, that's nuts, I can buy 10 of these. And I think we can all get tricked into that every now and then. You get an offer, go, holy smoke, that's cheap, maybe I'll just take that. So just thinking one more time before you buy something.
And what do you feel about the rental business? Why hasn't it fully kicked in the way that it should? Since we want to, renew ourselves, that's important for us. Why hasn't rental business become the thing?
Loaded topic. I think there are a lot of things that need to be figured out before it can work. I think if you're in the higher quality, higher price brackets, there's a business in New York where 2 ladies are doing that. It's fantastic. They have over 30,000 people on a waiting list.
Which one?
I can't remember the name now, so I'll have to get back to you on that. But it's a small geographical footprint in a city where you can deliver, in a few blocks. If we're doing that and we're sending it from Stockholm to Säffle, it's a longer part. So I think, find the niches where you can do this. But if you're down to really low-value products, and then the individual transport of just renting that becomes so high. So I think there's still a lot of issues to be figured out. And I think brands have historically always been even when the social media came. Oh my God, we can't have a social media account, then we can't control our brand. And now it's like, it is what it is. Everybody's posting anyways. Rental part is if you can start doing a really cool peer-to-peer service so that it doesn't have to go into a central warehouse, then you might have a different equation. Same thing with second-hand selling. If you do a platform that really works from a peer-to-peer perspective versus we're shipping this into our central warehouse and then we're shipping it back to somebody. So I think you need to figure out the models. It isn't like it can't work or it can work.
The consumer behavior.
Both consumer behavior and what niche, what positioning works and what doesn't, just from a pure financial perspective. And over time, you'll get more opportunities.
We have Sean here from Zoa Rental. Yes, Sean, my friend. Please pass the microphone to Sean. What's your thoughts on how Zoe is handling the rental business, Sean?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I think with rental, it has to solve a problem for the customer. And I think there is niches like event wear rental, which is a single use, but we really believe we're going to move towards more of someone's wardrobe being access-based. And I think you can use, if you can build the tech and the customer experience, that lets them substitute the way they're behaving today. Like, I mean, look at Shein, right? That's we're talking about educating the customer, but it's grown so rapidly, and that's because customers are price sensitive and they want to have that feeling every month where they've got a new outfit and they're wearing it less. So I think if you can use tech and rental to build an experience that gives customers that feeling and does it in a way that benefits the brand, I think that's where we see the future going. That's where we really aspire as our vision.
How many here have tried a rental? Great. Why?
It's only from a sustainability perspective. It's purely that, because you like clothes and you want to have new clothes, but you only want to wear it for a short period of time. So, yeah.
So I think that kind of seeing that we wanted to leave the public with some optimistic view about this business and also finish up with just touching point on, since we have been mentioning so much AI and tech, and how is sustainability being measured? Is there something to be developed there in terms of the measurement of sustainability so we all can have an index to follow? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there is no measurement yet that you as a customer could follow. So when you go into store, you wouldn't really know how sustainable is it, because all brands are using different measurements and so forth. But it's coming, of course. So there are huge initiatives, and and there is a lot of money going in there now. So I'm pretty sure we will have it. Because it's a must also. But for now, I think it's the brands has to educate the customer, and everyone is doing that differently, of course. So you see a lot of greenwashing, depending on from which angle you look at it. Yeah.
What do you want to leave the audience with?
No, but I think just to pick up on Fabian, who left now, but I think the peer-to-peer, which is then, if you're thinking of your wardrobe as digital instead, as an asset, as digital, and if you have it, then you could then rent out to someone next to you. There's also a lot of, we have something in Sweden, Hyglo, who is, working in a community. You have next door in the US, for example. Of course, that's going to facilitate a lot of things. I'm thinking also of returns, that you can also return an old garment when you're returning something else. There is also a lot of things that we can do, so we sort of connect all the dots in a way. Yeah.
Thank you. Chisco, what do you want to leave the audience with?
For your question about the measurement, I think that the most important thing right now, it will be, as we said before, legislation. It will be to have the same standard for everybody. So we can measure, from the same perspective, all the things that you can decide to buy. And as Fabian says, also it's very important to think twice before buying. Okay, and it's something that we talked before that is very important. Hannah says we have to think from the very beginning of the product, okay? And I used to talk about the end-of-life protocol, and I think it's very important that this applies to all the sectors that maybe you can have in your different companies. I mean, I think we cannot put anything, any new product in the planet without thinking how it will be ending. I mean, we have to think how we are going to put in the end of the life of this product when we are creating. This is something that we have to rethink in the future.
And take the responsibility ourselves as well, as Hannah mentioned, to compost the garment. Peter, your final words to the audience.
Yes. So I would say more like closely get better insights on your customers and educate the customers on if they have a bad behavior in how they purchase, return and claim. That's probably connected to like they are really costly and non-profitable. If you start with that, and then the EU legislation will help you to start like also monitoring and steering your flows in a new way. That includes like the returns is the best thing because it starts as the customer and you can decide already where should it go from the customer point of view or for the product point of view.
So you are leading the customer in a direction.
Again, education. Yeah.
Thank you. A warm applaud, everyone, right? We have our next, Pontus, our eminent previous panelist, now turning moderator. I'll let you introduce your panel.
Let's see if we could have a presentation here as well. But yeah, the topic is growth and global expansion in the financial backdrop. What are the learnings going from growth to profitable growth? And yeah, here we see the panel, amazing panel. And first and foremost, I just wanted to thank the organizers for me to moderate this vital and very interesting topic. And my name is Pontus Krusing, and I'm the CEO and founder of Nudient. And over the years, I've actually worked with some of the panelists and met all of them. So with that, I would like to welcome the panel, starting with Andreas, who's really eager to get on the stage. Andreas Sjölund, who's the CRO of Ingrid and also founder of Quinix. Next up, we have Jarno, who is the founder of Naked and a lot of other very interesting companies. And then we have Christopher, who's the CEO of Qliro and also founder of Bambora. Welcome. So when I read the topic of today, it strikes me that there are 4 different angles to the discussions today. We have growth, we have global expansion, we have financial backdrop, and we have profitability. And on top of that, we also have 3 different companies coming from 3 different industries. We have fashion represented, we have fintech, we have SaaS. So it will be a really interesting discussion today. And I think it's impossible not to talk about the value of AI for at least the future profitability. And Sebastian Simakowski, in his latest talk, talked about Klarna's strategy of using AI to replace departing employees, aiming to avoid the need to rehire people over the next years and leveraging on AI. And my initial question to the panel is, what are your perspectives on the role of AI contributing to sustainable and long-term profitability? Anyone? Christopher?
Hey everyone. We also investing quite a lot in AI, especially on topics like credit scoring, development on the tech side and so on. But with that said, I don't think the main purpose of AI is to kind of increase efficiency or kind of cost efficiency, but rather see how can we create a better consumer experience or merchant experience, or kind of be more effective in what we do.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen on the marketing side some bad stuff happening in the last 10 years, right? You know, the cookie thing that Apple did and whatnot, and the inflational environment on performance marketing and so on. So I think end of the day, AI is probably one of those things that will improve and, you know, be a good thing, right? We haven't had that much good thing happen for, you know, e-com for a while.
Yeah, so at Ingrid we help customers with deliveries, and we have a lot of data that can really help the customers get a better experience with deliveries. So, for example, sustainability, as we spoke about earlier, if we can rank the shippings or the deliveries that are the most sustainable, for example, for the customers, we can also, of course, make the best, the cheapest ones. So we're investing a lot in the AI from our data on the delivery side.
Hear you. So basically what you're saying is that, like, because Sebastian is talking about AI as a replacement for staff, and you're saying that it should rather be seen as improvements for product and services so we can be better and more attractive to our customers. Interesting. Christopher, you have had like steady growth over the years, despite the significant competition in the Nordic market. Could you elaborate a bit on your growth strategy and how important global expansion is to your growth strategy?
Our growth strategy is very much built up on a new focus for Qliro on merchants and kind of the merchant experience, fully focusing on payments. And with that, I've been in payments for almost 10 years, working with e-commerce in Canada, Southern Europe, a bit in India, and on the different payment platforms we had with Bambora and any other group where I worked, it was a couple of common themes that I think goes across payments and e-commerce across the globe, where how we can work with kind of optimizing conversion, driving upsell, and creating a good consumer experience that kind of drive consumers back to the merchant where they came from, I think goes across the board, and that's something we're investing a lot in. And we see kind of small incremental improvements everywhere, and I think that's adding up to a bit of kind of volume growth for both us and our merchant, but with that also helping us kind of win new merchants, which is differentiating us a bit from competition. But looking at kind of the global perspective, I think from Qliro's view, I don't think it's super important for us to be global and kind of start to win merchants in kind of locally across Europe or the globe in the short term, while we focus very much on kind of supporting our Nordic merchants to expand internationally outside Nordics and kind of outside Europe. So it's very important for us to kind of add new payment methods across all of Europe and also outside Europe as a first step.
And Jarno, you scaled both Nelly and Naked. Like how important has global expansion been compared to like growth in like the closer regions?
I had obviously two different journeys. Nelly was, hindsight is very early on, right? You know, and I think I'm almost a little bit more amazed what we did on Nelly back in, because I scaled from 60 to 800 million in 4 years between 2007 and 2011. You know, and we talk about much smaller e-com market, and when I look at that, yeah, we had some Germany, had some Holland, but it was mostly Nordic, and we had this hyper kind of macro environment fashion was the next big thing after CDs and books and whatnot. So we knew that growth in the sector is like 40%. So we had that, and on top of that we had so we grew like 4,000% with profitability, and with Naked it was a different thing. I wanted to really go global. That was the only goal I had in terms of I wanted to have something. How cool would it be to have a brand that is global? You can talk with people in South America about it and whatnot. And and then I made the targets. I always made the targets from top down. I said, I just came up with this 10-10-10 was my vision. 10 billion before 10 years and 10% or more on bottom line, right? And if you scale that down, you need to have certain targets. So it was very much top down. I just looked at that and said, okay, these first years we need to do this and then continue, right? But it's so interesting when you are aiming to go from as Naked, we got a bunch of money, but even if you get a bunch of money, you need to actually do the execution, right? You need to scale. So we scaled from 0 to 1 billion in 3 years, 0 to 2 billion in 5 years, and we knew that the Nordics was not enough for that. We always looked at the TAM, total addressable market. Looked at that, we knew that at a point we would probably start struggling at 23-25% penetration in Sweden. Same would be in the Nordics and whatnot. So, but of course, if you look at a country like Germany, we did like 1 billion in gross sales in 2 years after entering that market. A lot of returns, so the net sales is pretty crappy. So, but if you look at the total addressable market in Germany, we were quite small. So that was really interesting to see and what we saw was so interesting, and I think what the value for Naked was in investors' eyes, because we saw this, when we got a certain traction in one country, we could replicate that. And it was, so if we got this start in US or UK, it followed the same pattern as Sweden, Norway, Holland, so it was so cool to see that, as long as we get market fit, we knew that we will follow that path. So, but it requires, of course, 10-10-10 or 10 billion in sales in 10 years requires a big footprint.
And Andreas, how important is global expansion for Ingrid?
Yeah, no, it's definitely key right now to grow the business. At Quinex, when we grew the business, we were bootstrapped for the first 6 years, and looking back, we should definitely have gone global much earlier. So we went global 2014 into the UK. Then we struggled there for about 3 years. Then we made it in the UK. Then we went to Germany. It took another 3 years. And then we went into the US, and that took also 3 years. So now with all the mistakes we did there with Ingrid, we want to, of course, do it much faster. But to be able to scale and to grow the business and help 1 billion customer journeys, which is our goal, we have to get outside the Nordics. So that's definitely key.
I can tell you that it's a high-stake game, and if we want to go into the details, I can tell you how, of course, aiming that high requires some guts, and if it backfires, it hurts.
And Andreas, Ingrid recently got a 100 million SEK investment from VC and PE. So I would guess that, like in terms of prioritization, straight up, how important is profitability for you compared to growth?
Yeah, right now actually it's growth. So of course we have to keep track on the money and the burn rate and so on. But it's definitely investing in marketing, investing in sales to really grow the pipeline and the footprint globally. So that's what we're going to use that money to. And we're actually going to do another round now to be able to grow even faster. So if you know any good investors, we're going to be out pitching to raise some more money. But it's costly to go outside the Nordics. Salaries are higher. It takes time to build market penetration. So yeah, it's going to cost, but and of course eventually we're going to make money, but it's going to be investment right now.
And when you talk about profitability, you talk about bottom line. I mean, do you have profitability measures, how to measure the markets that you're currently in and approaching? How do you go about when expanding? Because it has to turn into profitability sometimes, so you need to lead on metrics, I guess.
Yeah, so we look a lot at customer acquisition cost, and the customer acquisition cost divided by ACV or annual contract value. So that's something we measure for each country we go into, and we expect to have a high burn rate the first couple of years, but then start making money and then taking that money and going to the next country. So you really need to keep track on that.
And Christopher, you recently done a turnaround, transitioning from losses to profitability. I mean, what was the key drivers behind that transformation, and what tough choices did you have to make to do that?
Good question. I think when I came into Qliro, my view was that we didn't only have a kind of a scale problem or a cost problem. We had a strategy problem or a focus problem. We were trying to do everything. The company was trying to be like the next neobank of the Nordic, focus on kind of credit products for consumers, and we stopped that and said we're going to do payments. We're going to do it really well. We want to be leading, at least in Europe, on kind of a merchant experience. And with that, we restructured the full organization. We launched a couple of new teams, invested a lot in kind of our data platform, setting up a merchant success team, working with kind of payment performance, kind of restructured our whole kind of product team. And with that, being very clear on that strategy internally, we changed basically 90% of our executive team, changed more or less 50% of all our leaders. But with that new strategy, that also came kind of quite naturally. Kind of some people were kind of super excited about this and kind of finally be focusing on the right thing. Some people realizing, okay, this is not my place anymore. Let's do something else. So it's been quite a dramatic kind of transformation internally, both from kind of a team perspective, but also from a cost perspective. We went from roughly a bit over 100 million in losses last year to kind of being profitable already in kind of the first quarter this year. So it's a lot of fun.
I guess that's like a natural step after being growing up. You have a turnover of like a 500 million SEK. So I mean that's naturally, and that comes to Jarno. You also gone through cost cuttings, and what are your best strategies and advice for navigating cost cutting, and also the market that we are in now, that you have to do. You have to be prepared for what's coming.
For us, it was, I can tell you how it goes when you plan for growing. Okay, we look at the next year. Okay, are we going to add 500 million or 700 million on top? Right. And the thing is that we cannot just 3D print our stuff. We actually have, quite a long time before we even get our goods. So we actually need to speculate. Companies like Naked, Nelly, other DTC companies need to speculate, right? So that's the thing, is that when a company like Naked buys into a 500 million budget for next year, it needs to be there to support the growth, right? But for example, what happened 2021 when we had the disastrous logistical backdrop where the drunk guy ran the boat in the Suez Channel and just interrupted the whole logistics chain. So we got our swimwear in September. It's really bad when you have swimwear for 100 million coming in, or you have summer dresses for 200 million coming in. So the consequences in terms of absolute numbers are quite staggering. That's why the headlines. But of course, the flip side of it, when you have a 2 billion kroner turnover, you can also turn that around quite quickly. Like Naked just added, after I left, which is one of the best things we of course did, we waited for the return fee. Nobody had it before. Then everybody, we started with, for Naked it's like 50 million a year probably. I don't know the numbers, but back of my head, and drove down the returns 10 percentage points. That's additional probably 100 or 150 million. So we knew that we had that opportunity, but I would say that the real thing is that if it's really easy to be quote unquote profitable if you plan for a 5% growth. If you're planning for a 70% growth on a base of 1 billion or 500 million, you are going to it is very, very tricky. And if you have delay, or if you don't have the top line or demand or something, the customer sentiment is not there, yeah, it will hurt. So I think if you want to play, so it's. But we talked about it. We had like 6 years with Naked that we had amazing incremental margin. So the company just become better and better. So we talked about it. Every single line in the profit and loss, I was obsessed with that because I'm coming from Kinnevik, MTG. We were obsessed that every single line in the profit and loss should improve by volume. So for us, 6 years, we knew that when we get bigger, we get more profitable. And we were profitable in 2021 in Q2, and we were still growing 80%. You know, but then 2021 came, and unit of economics just didn't work because the shipments were like 800% up, delays and whatnot. So we said that, okay, now growth is actually hurting us. So we had to kind of just rethink, and but it's that it's growth doesn't have to necessarily mean losses. It didn't do that for us for 6 years. It just improved bottom line. It's just last 2 years in this inflation environment we had to rethink. But now I know that they're on profitable again.
Yeah. What is the latest status of like?
I don't know. I'm not fully. I try to stay away. So it's one of the larger shareholders, but you know, I try to really keep my hands from you know, the details there. So I don't really know, but I know that they made some money here in Q2, and no, there's a good future, I think.
Yeah, and like we also talked about when we talked prior to this meeting about working capital. I mean, that is obviously like very important when you scale, that you have a really good working capital like management. Like, what's your best advice there?
Yeah, that's been my holy grail for a long time. I'm obsessed with negative working capital and DPOs and all of those details. It's so I'm starting actually a company that will address cash flow. Cash flow is the number one reason why companies default and go bankrupt or out of business, but it's only number 4 on the agenda of you know, management, because it's very complex. You have the payables, you have the receivables, you have the inventory, you have the capex, and all of that is very hard to predict. So we actually, I have a startup here in Marbella that is going to build this tool to predict cash flow. But for Naked, that was the whole thing, you know. And for us to be able to grow that fast, we needed to know that we were not, we were, you know, close to neutral working capital or negative working capital, which is. But I think founders spend way too little time on managing their cash cycle and working capital.
Yeah, and not only founders. I mean, cash flow isn't really like a management only question. I mean, it has to be like scaled down to like the operational work, and you have to like convince people that cash is like a scarce resource.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I developed these skills more or less during the journey, and of course, if I look at my background, I realized the things I know about how to manage cash now versus 6, 7, 8 years ago, I would not have been, you know, I would have not been forced to raise over 100 million euros as I did. So you know, so hopefully I can help other entrepreneurs to manage cash and cash flow during growth.
Please. Like a question to both Christopher and Andreas. I mean, like we're talking about cash and maybe investments. Like both of you run like SaaS and fintech companies. Like, how do you balance like investments, growth, and profitability? Because you both have like services that you can invest a lot in. Like, how do you balance that with growth and profitability in mind?
Yeah, so of course now we have to be much more effective with the money we get, because money is more expensive. I think the old way of growing SaaS companies was to hire a lot of BDRs, SDRs that was sitting and booking meetings, and then you hired a bunch of AEs trying to go out and close deals. I think the modern way of selling now is working much more with marketing, trying to build content that is really important for retailers like yourselves, and really build warm leads, like being on events like this, also working with partners. I think we have a great opportunity here with Voyado, Centra, and other partners to create like a Nordic alliance to go out and fight the worlds as Vikings, and that's another way of being effective and really using the cash much more smarter than in the old days when money was cheaper.
Well, I think it's a good question. In the current market environment, kind of volumes are kind of shifting quite quickly, kind of either up or down. Inflation is kind of increasing cost, and for us, we have a kind of a profitable growth strategy now. So we're not taking investment in the short term, but grow with the money we have. But then, given the kind of the dynamic in the market, we set a model internally. We said we will not do any budgets, we will not do any long-term financial plans. We do basically a monthly forecast where we kind of constantly are looking kind of at kind of cost volumes and kind of the investments we take, and then kind of adding on investment when we see kind of positive traction on kind of either kind of volumes increasing from existing merchant or winning new business, and then kind of taking those decisions much more dynamically, which means we take kind of new investment decisions every month, which also makes it more kind of fun and dynamic.
I think that is in contrast with what you said, Jarno. Like when you scaled Naked, you said like okay, 10, 10, 10. So you had to like make purchases for the next year, and like if you're scaling in that way you did, then you have to take risk. And Christopher is saying like be more dynamic, don't have long-term plans, and like is like slow and controllable growth the new hyper growth?
It's easy, hindsight, it's easy to be smart now, right? But we sat with investment banks every quarter throughout the last 4 years, and we looked at the value of our peers, right? And we could see this chart, and when you had the growth companies, they were still valued higher, until like 2 years ago. And for my only job was to deliver shareholder value, of course, and for me it's and the investors, of course, they were like, go at it, go at it, go at it, as long as we have economics of scale, as long as scale makes sense, as long as we have incremental margin. And so of course we added 4.5 million consumers in 5 years. Of course that costs a lot, but they are in a database right now. They're very loyal, and we tracked our cohorts super close, and we could see that our cohorts from 2016 was as strong as the cohorts that we gained from 2021. So so that was also the value that investors saw, that okay, and that was Zalando. Remember Zalando was like unprofitable for 10 years, but they always said to the investors, if shit happens, we have these and these and these, and these markets are profitable. Same was for Naked. Naked was profitable in many countries, but of course if you put down your flag in the US, you need to have that stamina, and that Sebastian talked about that in Klarna as well, that you cannot go to US and just think that it will solve it. You need to have kind of financial stamina, marketing stamina, be there, just hammer that in, and eventually it will, you get that hockey stick. So, but of course, hindsight, we subsidized countries like Lebanon. We actually became quite big in Lebanon, but looked at the unit economics, it did not make sense. But we were in the beginning, we put flags all over the place. We're going to, but hindsight, we should not have shipped there and give them free shipping and free returns to Lebanon. That was quite expensive. So, but it was part of our. But because it is a lot of trial and error if you're going for 10, 10, 10 or whatever, I don't think they will go for that anymore. But that was my target, and I knew that I needed to see where might we have the traction.
And like it sounds like you're saying that like in hindsight you were doing the right thing, but right now it's like obviously people are talking about slower growth and instead of hyper growth. But I mean that's also given the financial backdrop that we have today. Like cash will become cheaper like soon again, and then we'll probably be back like trying to scale. Or what's your view, Christopher? Do you think that like you will go back to like super scaling Qliro, or like is the slow growth and controllable growth like here to stay?
I don't think it needs to be slow growth just because you do it in a more controlled manner. At least not in our case. I mean, we still during the last 6-9 months tripled our sales capacity. We increased our developers 30%, and so we're still investing. But we're not taking kind of the big bet, 100 million kind of step by step, but rather doing kind of monthly incremental kind of investments.
And Andreas, like, if Christopher is representing controllable growth and Jarno is representing hyper growth, where do you put Ingrid in that?
Yeah, I would say hyper growth. I mean, you don't need so much money if you have the right product, you have the right team, and the right strategy, I think you can still have a company that does hyper growth even though money is more expensive right now. So it's maybe a bit harder, but you have to be smarter and sleep faster as well.
Like given that, I'm really interested in your role because it's not a VP sales, it's CRO. Like, how does that differ? Like, do you have like a profitability view as well, like also sales and expansion, or what is your role?
Yeah, great question. I think it's one of those roles that came from the US because I needed to make up new roles a little bit. But as a chief revenue officer, I would say you work closer with the CEO and the CFO. So you're like a VP sales is probably more on the sales side, just trying to hammer the number and get the deals in. As a CRO, you have to have the responsibility, of the cash burn and also working really close with the CEO and the CRO, or CFO. So that's the big difference, I think.
I would say if I could do it all over again, I would really we had faster and faster supply chain in the beginning, and then we had the chaos in the world, and that slowed the supply chain down a lot, and that made our journey to negative working capital, neutral working capital, really so much harder, right? So it set us back tremendously, right? We lost like 200-300 million in cash flow just by boats going slower. Your boat going, and we had a really high during my time a CSR agenda, right? We don't fly stuff in, so we had them on boat, but the boat normally took like 60 days. Now it was like 90 days. Those 30 days we had to pay for, and on this scale, so I think it is doable to grow fast. But I really pay attention to the working capital setup in the beginning, and that's my new company, and that's my kind of I think this is missing. I've been thinking about this for ages, and I even created a financial vehicle with a financial institute at the end with Naked that is actually in between us and the suppliers. They pay suppliers earlier than we pay the financial company. So if I had that vehicle from start, Naked would have grown even faster.
And on that note, you talked about CSR. Like the previous panel talked about sustainability, and what's your view? Like, how can you combine profitability and sustainability? It sounds like boat shipping is obviously better for profitability, but worse for working capital. But how do you go about with CSR and profitability? Is that something that you can combine?
Yeah, it is. It's obviously the customers want it, but they are also hypocrites. They say it. We ask them, do you want to have sustainability? Yes. Do you want to pay for it? No. So it is. But big companies need to drive the agenda, and we had a very. I created this integrated second-hand platform where we actually had peer-to-peer between customers. Hugely expensive to build it, like 50 million kronor to 100 million just in IT. Super complex, but we sold like 150,000 second-hand pieces the first year during my time with it, which is more than probably the niche sites that are selling it. But it is not. I'm a little bit afraid during this financial backdrop that those kind of projects will be scrapped because you need to have ruthless prioritization right now and during the time when there was capital, we could run those projects. I'm a little bit afraid that innovation on CSR will stand back because of the financial backdrop.
And maybe Andreas, you could. Ingrid is obviously an enabler for like driving like alternative shipment alternatives and stuff like that, and informing the customers which alternatives are better. Like, is that your contribution to sustainability, or?
Yeah, definitely. Like Jarno said, it's driven by the customers, and they want to understand more how much impact does a delivery have on the environment, and they want to take the better choices. So that's definitely something we are working with, and also looking at partners. There's one company called Value that is working with looking at the whole chain of the carbon footprint, and that's a partner we're talking to now to have that information integrated and also adding the delivery cost for the environment as well.
And like the last question is going to be to Christopher, and I'm really curious because you have insights to a lot of like data from Qliro, like given like the financial backdrop and like what is like the temperature of the market now? Like how are like e-coms in the Nordics performing?
I think it's a very different story, kind of segment by segment and kind of company by company. Of course, we have a lot of kind of transaction data on volumes, and compared to the past, we kind of most of our kind of merchants were growing to some extent, or kind of different growth rates, of course. But now we really see a difference of both kind of more expensive goods that you don't need here and now. People don't need to buy it here and now, so they wait. And kind of merchant kind of focusing on the segments are kind of hurting quite a lot. But then we also see in general that kind of the merchants have been really good at kind of the consumer value and creating value for the consumers, caring about the consumer journey, building loyalty. We kind of in a situation like this, when you have maybe some kind of cost focus and you draw down kind of marketing budgets, we see kind of these companies are still performing quite well. While the companies that haven't kind of focused as much on kind of the consumer journey and creating loyal consumers, then volumes are just disappearing when you reduce the marketing in that sense.
So not a turnaround yet?
No.
Okay. Thank you so much. A big applause.
All right, so now we're going to do some breakout sessions, everyone. Let's bring out our eminent different rooms. So you have these three choices. Artem, please, could we turn the music off? Thank you. We have these three choices. Cost control in an inflation environment, led by Andreas. Growth in an insecure consumer segment, led by Christopher. And our third, how to boost working capital, led by Jarno. So let's do, how many are interested, we need to know, depending on the room sizes in this place, how many are interested in the first topic here? Great, let's walk into a smaller room. So you can follow, yes. You follow now our eminent runner, Linnea, into that room. How many are interested in growth in an insecure consumer segment? Raise your hand. Perfect. You follow now Isabella. And I'm guessing the rest of you are interested in cost control in an inflation environment. Please follow Josephine.